Hi guys. My job at this morning of the day is to homosexualize you a little bit, just to provoke a small reaction. What I would like to say in few words, it's a basic description about LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people in Eastern Europe. I'm not using LGBTI formula because this I, intersex category, is not exactly well covered in a lot of countries in our region. First of all, what I think that you have to know is that LGBT people are considered aggressive, toxic, and a kind of foreign minority, a minority of import from your countries, invading the pure patriarchal Eastern European society. And because it's considered to be an aggressive and a toxic minority, it should be isolated and marginalized by the general population. You have to treat this danger in a way, right? The second feature I would like just to mention is that despite all those legal changes which happened in our countries in the region, despite all the legislation, despite all the equality bodies that do exist in a number of countries in our region, if you look at the level of social acceptance in these countries, you'll see that the vast majority of our population consider LGBT as a threat. They will not take a dinner, by example, with someone like me, a homosexual. So there is a strong public resentment against LGBT in Romania, in Russia, in Macedonia, in all these countries in the region. And because of this situation, discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity is considered okay. It's okay to discriminate someone who has a different sexual orientation or a different gender identity. Sometimes discrimination is even rewarded because it's considered to be a good thing. Why is that? If you look to the recent evolution of these countries, you will see the importance of religion, which plays a huge, significant role in almost all our societies. And there are some colleagues here who are considered to be anti-God people. My colleagues from Romania, those humanists, who are considered to be almost the agents of Satan. Well, yeah. So get ready. I'll be the religious guy now, okay? So let me to be on the other side, a gay and a religious guy, just to be a little bit playful. I'm doing this because religion should be taken seriously. And when I'm saying that, I'm not speaking about religion as religion. I'm speaking about the public importance of religion in all these countries. And it's not just an Eastern European affair. If you look to what happened in France, if you look to what happened in other Western European countries, you will see a growing importance of religion as a political factor. And I'll try to explain why is that, and why we should take religion seriously, regardless our identity, religious identity, humanist identity, whatever religious identity. Religion is important because it's used and misused with a very good degree of success. There is a significant growth of organized religious right movement, fundamentalist movement, which is heavily supported and nurtured from American fundamentalists. It's also favored by populist politicians who can be identified in all our countries, not just in Eastern Europe. And it's supported by, at least in Eastern Europe, by a number of key public personalities and a lot of journalists. And now, beyond all of this, we are facing the economic crisis, which worsened this situation. I'm saying that the fundamentalism, the rise of fundamentalism in Eastern Europe is important and should be taken into consideration because it's leading to a number of direct effects upon LGBT rights and also upon other sexual and reproductive rights. If we mention sex education or access to abortion, we'll see that we are part of the same formula. When we speak about LGBT rights, what we are seeing in the region, there are significant attempts to restrict the freedom of expression and the freedom of assembly for LGBT people in a number of countries, Russia, Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, all those stands from the former Soviet Union, to promote a manipulated concept called traditional values, and to use this concept of traditional values at the highest political stages, at the United Nations, at the European Union, but also at the level of the Council of Europe. I just returned yesterday from a session, a parliamentary session in Strasbourg, where a number of politicians heavily supported a resolution for transgender rights in Europe. And you couldn't see at that moment almost any opposition towards that, with one exception. And it was extremely interesting to hear that exception. It's a Moldovan guy, a Moldovan politician who is, I think it's functioning as a Baptist pastor in Chisinau, Republic of Moldova. He came up with 12 amendments to one resolution. Basically, he blocked the Parliamentary Assembly for a number of hours. You will say, well, it's just one guy, followed by several other lunatics, and they shouldn't be treated seriously. Actually, they are excellent in doing political advocacy. It happened just that Russia and their allies were not there. Russia, probably you know, is temporarily I don't know if it's excluded or it's not part officially suspended. Thank you. It's suspended from the Council of Europe. We should take seriously these people because they are well-resourced. They usually have budgets of millions of euros, millions. They are well-structured. They are excellent in campaigning, which is not our case quite often. And they do have excellent strategic plans behind them. And I will speak a little bit about these plans maybe later. Their intention is quite clear. They are standing against LGBT rights. They are anti-sex, if I can say so. Everything connected with sexuality becomes a problem. They are anti-abortion. They are anti-discrimination legislation in all of our countries. Even in those countries where anti-discrimination has a good legislation behind it. And more interestingly, they manage somehow to transcend the old barriers between politics, culture, and religion. You will see on their side a large number of people who are coming from all parties, from all sectors of society. So the old division, liberal versus conservative, it's now transcended. They are very good in pumping money against LGBT rights. And in the last 2 years, if someone will count how much they spent to dismantle various legal initiatives in our parliament, you will see a significant amount of money spent. And I can send you some information about their budgets if you are curious, just to find out how much and how they spend those money in these countries in the region. They have a mantra against homosexuality because they feel obliged to protect our societies from the deadly sin of homosexuality. They perceive themselves as the true believers and those who will save Europe from you guys, from those who are not having religious values, from those who believe that believe in liberal democracy. That's why they consider themselves to be a kind of campaigners for a true Europe, a non-secular Europe. And they are doing that using the human rights language, and that's a very interesting feature. They are doing that using religious freedom as a fundamental human right. How can you be against fundamental human rights? So they're not stupid. They consider religious freedom as absolute, superseding other legal and social limits. So it's the top of the human rights structure. And of course, religious freedom is not considered compatible with homosexuality and other forms of social perversion, social decadence manifestations. They use the religious freedom as a way to say, hey, we are here in this society, we'll not live anywhere, and it's definitely our right to protect our people against you. It's a war of values, and they do consider themselves as warriors. It's an ideological, it's a religious war, and they do so because it's their right to be present in public life, to help. And our colleague from Moldova knows a lot about how they exercise this public right to be present in the public life in part of our countries. It's actually a right to dictate the agenda of society, and I think that's the most important thing. We cannot leave these guys the possibility to dictate in our societies and to transform the human rights system we know and we are using in our favor. Of course, religious freedom is considered to be incompatible, not compatible with the anti-discrimination legislation. And that's also serious. They do say that once the anti-discrimination legislation is adopted or functionally in our countries, a silent war against religion started. So again, they had to defend themselves in our societies. To give an example, in Georgia, where the anti-discrimination legislation was adopted in 2014, they said publicly in various religious leaders that once this bill has been adopted, the war against Christians started in Georgia. So this will lead to the discrimination of Christian believers. It's their right to protect Christians, right? In other words, homosexuals are imposing a gay dictatorship upon the majority of the population. The Christians will be discriminated. Someone should do something about that. Why these Christians are discriminated against? Because they are preservers and defenders of moral values, which means family values, which means traditional values. if you look to their rhetoric, you'll see the intersectionality between all of these so-called values and the fact that they are interrelated. So if you say moral values, they immediately understand family values, traditional values. And it's not just rhetoric. You will see this discourse on all the political stages in our countries, but also at the level of United Nations or at the level of the European Parliament. The paradigm is quite clear. Heterosexuality is a traditional value. The way it is meant to be. And by supporting homosexuality as understood as a kind of non-traditional value, the West, the Western countries, the Western European countries, just open up a war against Eastern Europe and Eastern Christianity. You'll hear this discourse from the mouth of Mr. Giletsky. You will know him. Mr. Giletsky is this pastor, Baptist pastor I mentioned, who is very tough in Strasbourg at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And pay attention to the fact that in our society, this discourse is extremely popular. It's really understood, and sometimes it's quite embraced. In other words, right now, President Putin is the icon of this new religious right movement, a former KGB agent becoming the icon of a Christian movement means something. I'm saying that because it's obvious that they are very good in manufacturing, preparing societies, in distorting anything which is basic. Mr. Putin is, and his allies are the defenders of the Christian Europe, and that's why they started a war, including in Ukraine also, against the Western Europe and USA. They have to defend themselves, right? They have to defend the values in which they believe. They don't just defend themselves, they are messianic. They export their agenda abroad in all the former Eastern European countries, Romania included, but also at the level of United Nations, creating a lot of alliances with a number of Islamic countries, but also with Vatican. And you can see this alliance also, again, at the United Nations, in the Council of Europe, but also in the national parliaments. And by crafting this imperialistic moral agenda, Putin's regime actually is smashing its opponents. They cannot have a say simply because they are defending the moral values, the traditions of that country. So they are quite good in creating an agenda which is so appealing for their societies. Quite recently, Mr. Lavrov, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, made a very interesting speech, a historical speech at UN. It was March 2014, at the 25th session of the Human Rights Council of the United Nations. And I will try to quote this discourse because you should pay attention to what he is saying. Mr. Lavrov said, "We call for taking into account cultural and historical particularities of different people and understand and respect traditional values that will help encourage and protect human rights and freedoms." Supporters of ultra-liberal approaches, that's you guys, of propagate policy of all permissiveness and hedonism, saying that moral values, which are common for all of our countries and for all religions, should be revised. Such actions, your actions, are destructive for society and for the generations. This is a state discourse, it's not a moral pastor, moral preaching in front of the Human Rights Council. I would like to say the provisions of the International Pact on Civil and Political Rights envision legislative instruments to restrict rights and freedoms in favor of population, public security, law and order. Let me translate what he's saying. What he's saying basically is that human rights cannot be taken seriously if they are not doubled by moral values. In the absence of the moral values he's speaking of, human rights are nothing and cannot be used. So you should have both. That's a switch in the way we understand human rights. He's also saying that these countries he's mentioning are particular. They should live alone. They should not receive orders from Brussels or from New York or from Washington. Leave us alone. He's also saying that, guys, you'll be in trouble. We have instruments to restrict your rights and freedoms. And he's mentioning that by using the provisions of the International Pact on Civil and Political Rights. Why he's doing that? Because someone should work in the favor of the population, public security of that country, law and order. So order should be clear, safe. Someone should be the policeman. And this role is played by Russia. Anyway, I mentioned this discourse again because it's probably it's the first clear-cut political message which is announcing the way Russia and its allies will conduct their actions in the region, and that's important. Secondly, you can see easily the role of religion. Religion is used as a political factor, and we know that right now in Russia, the Orthodox Church is having a huge role in first reading of the legislation proposed. They have a say before any other parliamentary committees if a piece of legislation is okay or not. And that's possible because of the special partnership between Mr. Putin and the Orthodox Patriarch Kirill II, I think. And what he's saying also is that human rights are not exactly common for all human beings. Certainly not for the LGBT people. Which means in practical terms that incitement to discrimination is a moral duty. They should discriminate. They have the obligation to discriminate. It's not by incident this war against homosexuality. Because it's a part of a cosmic battle between good and evil. So you are on the side of evil, they're on the side of God. Who are you to attack God? How can you win if God is on their side? Those who are supporting LGBT rights insult the traditional faith and the national identity and fully deserve to be punished in various ways. I'll give you a few examples. I think 2 years ago, it was like that, yeah, 2 years, last year, sorry. Accept, my organization, organized a whole month. It was called LGBT History Month. And one of the public events was held in a museum. It's called the Museum of the Romanian Peasant. Yeah. Museum, right? That museum has a cinema. We went to the cinema to see a movie, a comedy, an American comedy, which portray, among other things, a gay couple, a lesbian couple, having kids. The name of the movie is Kids Are All Right, if you have seen it. It's just a comedy. Well, again, this museum is located in the middle of Bucharest, several hundred meters of the Romanian government. It's a very sunny location. And suddenly, out of the blue, a number of people brutally interrupted the movie and started to shout. They had icons with them to demonstrate that they are on the God side. They made a number of Nazi signs, including Heil Hitler, and they explicitly said that the homosexuals should be exported from this wonderful, pure country called Romania. Well, if this is not a hate crime, I don't know what a hate crime is. I will not speak right now about the way the Romanian authorities reacted legally to this incident. Usually in our countries, hate crimes are not identified as hate crimes and cannot be punished because those interpreting hate crimes are unable to understand what a hate crime is. And I was curious to see if the church is setting a reaction. A bunch of people using religious symbol, attacking other people is not okay, even for a conservative church. The Romanian Orthodox Church said nothing about this case. In Greece, the members of the Greek parliament are now under attack if they will vote in the favor of civil partnership legislation for those bloody gay couples. Actually, they have no chance other than the vote in the favor because it's a clear decision of the European Court of Human Rights on this particular topic. They do have civil partnership legislation for straight couples, heterosexual couples. The court said, guys, that's discrimination. If you have such a legislation, you should allow the gay couples to enjoy the same rights and freedoms. So the parliament has no choice, actually. What the Greek Church, Orthodox Church, is saying is that if their Orthodox parliamentarians will vote in the favor of this legislation, they should be excommunicated, and they will be excommunicated from the church. In a country like Greece, to be excommunicated by a church, the national church, well, that's serious. Some people will love that. Otherwise, the vast majority of them will be a big problem, not because they are not liberal enough, but they know that they need votes of the general population. In Georgia, 2 years ago, on May 17th, May 17th is the International Day Against Homophobia. A number of people like me, few, decent guys, I would say, right? Oh, come on. Tom, went to the streets of Tbilisi and just to say, hey, we are here, we are part of this society, look to us, watch us. This is a society in which you don't see homosexuals. You speak about, but you don't see them because they are not out. The same case in Romania, more or less. It's more or less the same situation. So our guys went to the streets of Tbilisi to show up, to be seen. They were immediately surrounded by hundreds of decent Christian people led by monks. It was extremely interesting to see that mob demonstrated against a peaceful number of LGBT activists. And of course, the physical violence started immediately. And police tried to interfere and to block the aggressors. Some of them were wounded. It was quite a tough situation. But what was interesting in that case is not that this violent attack happened, that was predictable in Georgia. What was unpredictable is to hear the Georgian Orthodox Patriarch Ilia II, a venerable old guy, a very cultivated guy, considered to be a liberal patriarch among other Orthodox patriarchs, inciting general population to go against the LGBT people. He literally said that there is a violation of the rights of the majority, and the Georgian population should protect the rights of that society. And the LGBT people are not part of the Georgian society. So not by surprise, a number of people led by priests and monks put into practice this incitement to hatred, sponsored by the Patriarch Ilia II. It's worrying to see religious forces being connected or directly associated with neo-fascist movements. And I think we should be very strategic, trying to dismantle this unholy alliance. It's not about religion here, it's about a strategy. We cannot leave this kind of alliances happening. It's really threatening the fabric of our society, and it's a worrying sign for a number of vulnerable groups, you being one of them, actually. Probably in Russia, you know that you cannot express yourself as a gay or a lesbian, bisexual, or transgender man or woman, simply because you'll be immediately considered that you are a promoter of gay propaganda. And this is illegal in Russia. Now it's the same law, the same piece of legislation is, I think, taken seriously into consideration in Kyrgyzstan. It happened in Ukraine, but I think it didn't pass. And it happened, and it's part of the new parliamentary agenda for a number of countries in the region. In Republic of Moldova, in autonomous region, it's the south of that republic called Gagauzia, the parliament, the local parliament, it's called the People Assembly, adopted in 2013 an anti-discrimination legislation to directly discriminate against LGBT people. You have to know the title of this legislation. It's called the Law on Ensuring Principles of Equality, Equity, and Objectivity that prohibits the propaganda of sodomy, lesbianism, bisexualism, transgenderism, same-sex marriage, and child adoption by same-sex couples. It's one of the most crazy pieces of legislation you can see. But it's, on the other hand, you have to be a genius in order to adapt a legislation considered to be an equality legislation to discriminate against a vulnerable group. I think I will stop here with examples, but I'm sure you'll have questions about what's going on in these countries. What I like to say at the end of this presentation is that we need to be a little bit more strategic in crafting alliances, even with unusual partners. I'm saying that because right now, LGBT organizations in the region are not having plenty of partners, solid partners in our societies. You don't have a lot of possibilities to craft alliances in our societies as humanists. And we know that we have a common enemy. which is this organized religion-based homophobia in all the region. What can be done, at least for the beginning, is to constantly monitor the opposition that is steering homophobia and intolerance in the region. By example, we do know little about who are the main actors, who is doing what the tactics they are using, how they are financed, and if that's financing affair is legal or not. And that's not okay. If we pretend to be a pro-human rights movement, we have to find a way to monitor what's going on in a systemic way in order to react more timely to these challenges and to understand better what are the tactics they are deploying in order to convince parliamentarians and society at large. Again, this is not about religion. Monitoring the religious right opposition will not make you religious in any way. It's just a bloody documented monitoring instrument. All of us can use it. I do strongly believe that there is a huge need at this moment to craft an alliance between mainstream human rights organizations, LGBT NGOs, and faith-based groups. Simply because we cannot give the possibility of these guys to have God in their hands, to monopolize God for their political purposes. And I think in the last 2 years, I will say that there is a slight progress in this area. ILGA Europe, which is International Gay and Lesbian Association based in Brussels, the European Humanist Federation, I hope I'm saying the right title, thank you. CEJI, which is the Jewish Contribution for an Inclusive Europe, INORP, European Network on Religion and Belief, and other religious groups are trying to find ways to combat religion-based homophobia with religious voices, and that's important. You would like to see that religious leaders are saying no to violence, are saying no to incitement, are saying no to discrimination, and have a voice in our societies. Because these leaders are not having a voice right now. The only voice you can hear is the voice of the fundamentalists who is taken into consideration because they are the voice of God. There is no alternative to that voice. I know that in some of our countries, churches are much more careful to craft the public discourse, and some of them are pro-gay, pro-LGBT, or pro-sexual and reproductive rights. That's not happening in Eastern Europe at all. I know that in a few weeks, a common and public declaration will be made on behalf of ILGA Europe and the INORP, European Network on Religion and Belief, on supporting LGBT rights. It will be, from my point of view, an unprecedented declaration which should be somehow multiplied and used in our national context. We can also find ways to not, I don't know how to say that without offending you. I'm not good sometimes in this area. You should find ways not to be perceived as anti-God people, anti-religion. In our countries, to be anti-religion, close the doors in front of you right now, right in the moment you are speaking. You are simply not credible if you are perceived an anti-God. I have no clue how to do that. That's also true. But we have to find a way as human rights people to demonstrate that we take seriously all basic fundamental rights, including freedom of religion. Freedom of religion should be protected also by us. Freedom of religion doesn't mean that a certain category of people in this country is allowed to discriminate against LGBT people or against Roma people or against whatever vulnerable group. It's simply a way to show that we take them seriously and we do understand their need. I know that in a lot of our countries, there is no dialogue between religious factions and human rights organizations, humanists being included here. But this dialogue should happen. And we have to be smarter than them and convince those who are moderate enough and can become a voice to defend human rights in this context. Religious voices are important. Try to remember the importance of religion in the United States and the role of some churches on protecting human rights in that country. It's not just a historical role, it's a constant involvement for a number of progressive religious groups. And we have to find a way to identify and work with these progressive people. They do exist. They still don't have a voice in our context, but we have to help them to have a voice. It's in our interest and it's strategic for our purposes. And yes, I do believe that we need to prepare a new generation of LGBT activists, and not just LGBT activists, human rights activists in general, that are able to change the current human rights narrative. If we continue to speak in the plain human rights language in some of our societies, this won't be understood. Speaking about the Declaration of Human Rights, when you are in a public dialogue with a priest, by example, it's suicidal. We will not win such a debate if our voice is colored just with abstract and very intellectual concepts. We need to find a way to speak about our values and to demonstrate that our values are important for all of them, religious and non-religious people. It's a little bit of a switch, because, but I think it's important because otherwise our opposition will be the owners of values. And this is, again, dangerous. We have to demonstrate that we do protect values in our societies and we are defenders of those values. Again, don't use exclusively the human rights language because it's not a parliamentary debate. It's not a technical debate. We have to win those who are undecided in our societies, know those who are, have ultimate convictions and believe that God is on our side. The vast majority of our people are undecided. We have to find a way to capture their attention. And I think that the last thing I'd like to say is that we simply have to find ways to be more visible and to speak up in the name of these values as diverse as possible. And if we'll manage to include here these fake groups that can speak also in terms of values, it will be, the battle will be much more dynamic, much more interested, and will not be against your identity, your organizational DNA. We should find new ways to win the battle, especially in this region, which will become more and more religious. I'm sorry, that's inevitable. And if this is the case, we should find a way to play in this court. Questions? Yeah, sir. Do you,
I think we should use media campaigns with the wording like "Stop promoting hate" or "We love people regardless of their sexual preferences, etc." The key word to use here is hate rather than human rights. Another thing is that this talk, as well as the social media session we had earlier today, highlights the important need of using secure communications so that we are able to get in touch and support individuals who are suffering persecution. Perhaps we ought to have a workshop on using secure communication tools out there on the internet. Unfortunately, governments don't make this easy. But there are tools out there that can be used to help defeat surveillance, government surveillance, corporate surveillance, and fighting for surveillance and privacy is also a partner battle, if you like, in enabling people to be able to communicate and trust safely.
I fully agree. Do you have a question? Okay. Sorry. Yeah, you first. You
said that we are anti-God, that we are...
no, you are anti-God. I'm not.
I'm pro-science, it's not the same.
Of course.
It's comparable. But there is a lot of Humanist people working into a pluralism interface dialogue, so it's a bit reductionist to just say you guys are anti-God and Satan and stuff. I think the movement is a bit broader than that. But you talked about the monitoring aspect, you talked about EHF, the European Humanist Federation. They are monitoring, there are quite a few scientific research on which groups are there, how are they financed, where are they active, what are their websites. So if that is something you are looking for, you can find it quite easily. But the question is, in Belgium, for instance, we have a lot of pedophile problems in the church. So when we talked about the gay questions, some priests who do abuse children have a very divided statement. So if you are looking for new ways of approaching the thing, I think within the church there are a lot of priests who have homosexual feelings. And have you ever tried thinking about targeting that group? You have Catholics for Choice, who is an extreme left Catholic wing, who is pro-gay marriage, I think a good strategy would be within the church and the religious community to divide them. Like they are doing sometimes with the humanist, pluralist, freethinker, secularist community, they divide us. Let's maybe try the same.
Well, that's an excellent idea. We do. I'm wearing here another hat. I'm working for the European Forum of LGBT Christian Groups, and they do try to use this kind of methods, and they do work in partnership with Catholics for Choice and a few others, trying to infiltrate our messages within the Catholic Church. And we were part of the debate on family, which happened in Rome. It just started actually last September, and it's quite interesting actually to see what's going on there. But when I'm speaking about monitoring, yes, I do agree there are pieces of information. What we do not have is the full picture. When I'm saying that, it's what I need to see is the connection between them. How come a leader from France who was behind Manif Portu, I think it's called that movement, in which was seen on the streets of Paris and a few other cities, are so good in crafting relationship with the Orthodox Church in Russia, with the Slovak parliamentarians and so on. How come they work together? What kind of resource they are using? Where they do prepare their new generation of activists, how come they have so large access to legal resources and have huge budgets for litigation, for strategic litigation? I give this example because we do not have this picture. we have something. Yeah, I think it's important to work with these faith-based groups, if possible, the progressive groups, and to try to find ways to maximize their voice. But let me to give you an example. I mentioned briefly about what's going on in Rome. That cycle will take at least 3 years, with a lot of meetings, expert meetings, bishops' meetings, da-da-da. Well, if you look from a budget point of view, to work in Rome in all those periods, it's almost a suicidal mission. It takes a lot of money. But yes, it should be done. And it's, some of us are trying to do the best with our very limited financial possibilities and human resources possibilities. But if I move into the Orthodox framework, which is important for so many countries in Eastern Europe, you will see that there is no hierarchical compact structure, a monolithical structure, and you should find ways to deal with various bishops and patriarchs and so on and so on. They're preparing for 200 years a pan-Orthodox synod for 200 years. And apparently, they managed to organize a meeting next year in Istanbul. For sure, this meeting will touch areas such as non-discrimination, freedom of religion, and family issues. So we have to find ways to be there. But the question is, are we prepared? Do we have Orthodox allies? Did we try to open up channels of communication and debate with them? That's quite difficult. So it's it's a matter of strategy, but it's also a matter of money. And we didn't find yet the solution, how to work with that.
I agree very much with you. And just a piece of information about the Catholic priest. Just yesterday in Italy, a priest was arrested for pedophilia. So, yeah, so just another one. But anyway, in Italy in particular, we had a particular law which says that a religious organization can preach their values that can include discrimination, but individuals cannot perform those beliefs. And so that kind of cut out of the picture all the religious problems, the religious debates. So right now the debate in Italy is more about some pseudo-scientific fact that some religious leaders are carrying to discriminate and not make it possible for homosexuals to legally marry in Italy. And the great thing about that law is that we can falsify those pseudo-scientific claims, and we don't have to worry about the religious debate and leave it to the religious community, because there are many Christian churches who are in favor of gay marriage. So do you think that that could be a solution, a first step solution, also for the Orthodox context? Because, for example, the Vatican didn't sign up the Human Rights Declaration, so you cannot base, you cannot speak about the
general.
Yeah.
They recognize also the right for children. That's why the pedophilia problem is an issue for the
I'm not so sure. Well, anyway, do you think that that piece of legislation could be used also in Eastern Europe?
I think this is an aspect which is beyond legislation. It's about how we use the current legal framework in balancing freedom of expression, which they fully deserve, because they do deserve freedom of expression in the same way we do deserve. So how we balance freedom of expression, non-discrimination, equality issues, and that's a very tough issue. I can give you a different example. It's about abortion. A number of organizations in Romania and abroad find a way to agree that various church groups can object against abortion on a number of theological, ethical grounds. The physicians can object against abortion And honestly, it's worrying to see more and more physicians saying no to abortion in front of women who are in a desperate need and are legally entitled to get that public service. However, a public hospital cannot say no to a service. So this is a way to show that, yes, we do respect their freedom of expression, freedom of belief, freedom of religion. They are completely free to express their views. They are pretty free to engage the medical community into a debate on this topic. But the hospitals, the service providers, should find a solution to accommodate the needs of the woman and offer a service. Okay, that's a strange example, I agree. But it was a way to show that we take seriously their rights and we don't dismiss their views on this. Particularly, we heavily disagree on these issues. When it's about homosexuality, I think it's exactly the same. I have no interest to change their opinions. I don't want to change their heart on this subject. I just want to deserve the same rights the majority in my country is taking as granted. So this is a difficult dance. It shouldn't be an Argentinian tango dance with them. But still we have some ways of maneuver to demonstrate that we are not against their rights. They do deserve the same rights we are having. And when it's about the Catholic Church or the Orthodox, about the Orthodox Church, the situation is a little bit more difficult because they are not used to entering a dialogue with certain groups in our societies. They don't even recognize this group as they think that we are actually heterosexuals who choose to be different, and just by incident we play by ear and meet same-sex people. So the dialogue was not yet opened up. We need to find ways to open up such a dialogue. I don't believe that this is a legal issue. I do believe that this is a tactical issue. Because to finalize your question, because we do have anti-discrimination legislation which protect on the ground of sexual orientation. How we apply it is the difficult topic here. Yes. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Hi, I would just like to make a comment about what you said, using hate and violence as an argument. And about what you said about finding middle ground and narrative for debating the right of discrimination versus the right of, of religion. In Macedonia, in the last 2 years, we have had two major issues in relation to the LGBTI people. First of all, the organization was attacked 6 times in the first 2 years since its opening, and none of the perpetrators have been sanctioned yet. So the first issue was combating the impunity, and the state tolerated violence against LGBTI people. And the second issue was the attempt of the government to introduce an amendment to our constitution with which they declared that not only marriage, but the extramarital union as well, is a union solely between one man and one woman, which, as you said, is counter the practice of the European Court for Human Rights. In the first case, you may think that we would have more success because it's a common issue, so it's an issue against violence and stuff like that. But on the contrary, we miscalculated that pointing out the violence constantly would present us as someone pretending to be the victim in every possible case. So we didn't went well with the general public. While on the other hand, while we combated the Amendment 33, we didn't pay that much attention on the discrimination itself, the hate itself, or the violence itself. We used those figures only as argumentation. And our main narrative was disputing their arguments, which basically in reality have no sense. And as a result, we were successful in combating the amendment. It hasn't been passed yet, it won't be. And on the other hand, we still haven't had 1% sanction for violence, so I declare that as lack of success. On the other issue, finding a narrative to counter their claim for freedom of religion, we go with the following approach. So it's okay, you have the freedom of religion, but stick to your religion, stick to your dogma. When you're speaking about LGBTI people, you can use categories and words that derive from your dogma. In other words, we can say that that behavior is sinful because the category of sin is a category specific to religion. But at the same time, when you say that LGBTI people are sick, are crazy, or they cause floods and hurricanes, you are leaving the area of religious dogma and you are entering the area of medicine, psychiatry, and the area of ology, and they have all stated that issue. The answer is no, it's not. So it's a pretty dangerous dance because at the same time they can use the cards on our side argument and stuff like that. It's a very difficult process, but we have had ways of practice that. And I want to thank you for your speech. It's quite inspiring.
Thank you.
Last question.
Yeah.
You said that the religion is growing in Eastern Europe. Why do you think that? Me and I think my colleagues too from the Secular-Humanist Associations, we do not agree with this. I think what right is in reverse, it's decreasing.
Do you have some data on that?
And I think that the recent actions made by Eastern Orthodox Church in all these countries and by Eastern Footing and his allies are more like a desperate attempt to stop this phenomenon of decreasing faith and something like a last attempt to salvage something more than anything else.
I think it's a matter of how you calculate the importance of religion in a society. After 1989, for sure, religion played a much more public role in almost all the countries, with some exceptions. Estonia, Czech Republic, there are some exceptions indeed. But what we noticed in the last period of time, it's an instrumentalization of religion for political purpose. This is unprecedented at this scale. That's the first thing. And again, it's dangerous. The second thing is that they are much better in communicating more and more. They're using new technologies to get engaged into debates, into political affairs. And it's what I notice is a decrease in the popularity of the church as an institution. That's true. This shouldn't be considered to be a decrease of religion in our countries. Religion is not the same thing with church as an institution. And if you ask various people on just briefly on the streets about their values, you will notice that their values are religiously infused. How many people in Romania perceive themselves as religious? Almost 90%. It was just a question. 80, 88 or?
No, it's wrong.
It's wrong.
The latest data show only 77% of people identified themselves as religious in Romania at the end of 2014. In perspective, put it into perspective, in 2012, 89% of the population identified as religious.
As Orthodox.
No,
as religious.
That's religious. So
okay.
It's a 12% decrease in years in Romania.
Well, this is a good. It's a good sign. However, I do this as a very tricky issue, and it will not decrease under below 50%.
And 66% of those between 18 and 25 declare as religious.
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is basically that the vast majority of people in our country somehow declare themselves as being religious. What that means is a different issue. How they articulate their religious perspective is a completely different matter. But it's the vast majority of our population. We simply cannot ignore it because politicians are not ignoring this reality. It's about votes. Okay, guys, I'm stopping here.